Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's Kators 88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.
Today, we are talking about representation in media of toxic masculinity, healthy masculinity, inclusivity, and the impacts and statistics of representation in media.
We had a conversation in the van the other day.
Yeah.
About this, I'm very excited to get into it.
A good conversation.
Yeah.
We were talking about just the representation, the mental impacts that has on men and women, and then just talking about the different like archetypes and stereotypes of male portrayal in media.
Oh, yeah.
Do you want to hit us off with the first unhealthy male archetype that is common in films?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. Here we go. Number one, the stoic lone wolf. So you're probably thinking, Jay, tell me about the stoic lone wolf. Well, I'll tell you. So the stoic lone wolf is emotionally shut down, often refuses help, isolates himself, that type of character. Obviously, people know what lone wolf means. Violence is often seen as a strength and vulnerability as a weakness. Here's an example. Batman. In many different versions, Batman. Jack Bauer from 24. Basically, almost any Clint Eastwood character.
Yeah.
You can find. Now, for each of these, there is a healthy counterpart. So the healthy counterpart for the stoic lone wolf is the integrated individual. Can stand alone, but also knows when to seek connection and help, shows emotional range without any shame. Example of this would be my favorite fictional character, Aragorn from Lord of the Rings. Dude's a ranger. Dude is isolated in the wilderness, so lone wolf-ish, but he's integrated. So he can stand alone, but he also knows when to seek connection and help, and shows emotional range without shame. He's got emotional range, and I'm not talking like emotional sobbing, but the dude has a depth to him and an emotionality to him, but he can also go alone if he needs to. Other examples, Sam, Lord of the Rings as well, and T'Challa from the Black Panther.
Yeah, that's a good one. That was a good movie.
Black Panther?
Yeah.
It really was.
The next one we came up with is the angry anti-hero or the brooding bad boy. Yeah, so they're usually really emotionally reactive, self-destructive, like driven by something akin to rage or revenge. It's often glamorized as like passionate or deep, but it's mainly focused on violence and revenge. Mm-hmm. So an example of that would be The Punisher. Thomas Shelby in the Peaky Blinders.
Oh, wow.
Tyler Durden in Fight Club would be an example.
Thomas Shelby.
The healthy counterpart is the self-aware protector. So they feel anger, but they channel it into protection, justice, or healing without losing the empathy piece. So I think empathy is really lacking in the anti-hero.
It's like just a blind rage, and that's just your
Yeah.
total driving force.
Yeah, so some examples of possible examples we came up with of a healthy counterpart would be Steve Rogers in Captain America, Maximus in Gladiator when he chooses mercy.
Maximus the Merciful.
Yeah, so that would be another example of that.
I love Gladiator. It's such a good film. Okay. Number 3 that we came up with is the womanizer / playboy. So obviously a lot of these are kind of self-explanatory from the title, but this one, just to go a little bit further, defines masculinity through conquest and emotional detachment from partners. Hypersexual, but emotionally unavailable. So maybe you could say hypersexual, but hypo-emotional type thing. James Bond, Tony Stark. Immediately thought of Tony Stark pre his character development. I mean, definitely Iron Man 1, absolutely. Healthy counterpart would be, we call the respectful romantic. So it sees intimacy as like a mutual thing, reciprocal, relational, emotionally connected, values consent, depth, and reciprocity. I would say. So an example would be Gomez Addams in the Addams Family. Love the character. Ted Lasso from Ted Lasso on Apple TV.
Us some Ted Lasso.
Yeah, love Ted Lasso. Number 4, next one, we got the dominant alpha, the commanding leader. So this type of person uses power to control, dominate, or silence others. Often has their own rigid ideas of what, quote, real men do. Example would be Gordon Gekko from Wall Street and Jordan Belfort from The Wolf of Wall Street, both Wall Street guys. Healthy counterpart would be the servant leader who leads through compassion, humility, and collaboration. This type of person, this type of man seeks collective success, not just domination over others. So an example would be Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird and Coach Taylor from the television series Friday Night Lights.
Then you have the comic relief clown / man-child. Immature, avoids responsibility, weaponizes incompetence as a lovable trait. Some examples would be Peter Griffin from Family Guy and most of Will Ferrell's characters. The healthy counterpart of that would be the playful partner. So it keeps humor and the playfulness in the picture, but it's grounded in accountability, emotional maturity, and reliability. So an example of that would be Marshall Erickson in How I Met Your Mother.
Yeah, that's good.
And then Samwise Gamgee shows up again here, I think, in from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Gosh, love Sam. You know what? What was that show that we watched that had, it was like a part sitcom, part drama where it would flip back and forth? Where like it was a sitcom with the guy's perspective.
Right.
What was that show? Because the husband is
what
that.
is that called?
I don't know, but the
it's
husband's
so
that.
good. It was
Yeah.
good. We never completed that.
We saw
It was
2
too
episodes.
sad for me. It
Yeah.
made me so sad.
It was really hard. Yeah. It's called Kevin Can F Himself.
Right. Kevin can F himself.
Yeah. Our last one, the hero who never cries. This guy has this really big overemphasis on physical strength. He suppresses grief, zero emotional processing. So an example would be Rambo. And kind of like the genre, most action movie leads from like the 80s and 90s. Healthy counterpart would be the vulnerable hero who shows courage and allows grief and fear and softness to coexist alongside of strength. An example would be Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, and Harry Potter, especially in the later films. So I think overall, it's not that like in all of these archetypes, and this one in particular, but all of them, that we don't need like less strength from men at all. What we need is more like full spectrum strength. So strength that also includes care and vulnerability and connection and relationships. So it's strength more spread across a full spectrum of human existence.
Why do you think it matters?
Well, I'll tell you, what immediately comes to mind is whenever I watch films that have more emotionally available guys, I always think Aragorn. I think Faramir too from Lord of the Rings and Samwise and Frodo. If I watch movies where there's a guy like that, it really impacts me on a deeper level because it feels more like representation. Like I can see myself more in these characters than like in Rambo or something. You know what I mean? So for me, it feels like representation that I can see myself in these heroic characters. And I think also it's important because obviously young men consume a lot of media. And I think for younger men to be raised seeing these heroic, but also emotionally complete and emotionally available men paints a better picture of what masculinity looks like and what you might want to aspire to be like, you know?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of men that probably identify, though, and see themselves mirrored in the comic relief clown or the womanizer playboy or, you know, the stoic lone wolf, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that is the culture that we live in.
Yeah. And it's interesting that each of those have that counterpart that, hey, you can retain these things that you identify with, but there's also a way to be more whole in those things, or like more connected with your full range of like your, you know, guys have a lot of feelings. It's just that we avoid them or we channel them to an acceptable feeling. So have you know, the lone wolf thing, you could be a lone wolf, but you can also be, you know, more grounded and more like emotionally, what's the word I'm looking for? Like emotionally whole, but also like not emotionally repressed.
Yeah, yeah. The cost of toxic masculinity, it's not just the emotional cost of seeing yourself represented or not seeing yourself represented. It's measurable in mental health stats, in violence statistics. Basically, it's measurable, like the impact that this toxic masculinity has. So I want to read you some statistics that I found interesting.
Yeah, sounds great.
So boys taught traditional masculinity norms show higher rates of alexithymia. It's difficulty identifying and expressing your emotions.
Oh, yeah.
You do struggle with that.
I mean, it has been a really hard, arduous journey trying to be reconnected with those parts. Yeah, it's hard to know how I feel about something. It's all just jumbled up.
Yeah, and that condition or that inability to identify and express your emotions leads to higher depression and anxiety rates.
Oh, yeah, I have experienced that too.
Which we don't need because men die by suicide 3.9 times more often than women in the U.S.
Yeah, it's way more prevalent.
Only about 25% of men will ever seek mental health help from a professional, compared to about 50% of women who are struggling with mental health conditions.
That's really sad. So then, why do you think that is? Why do you think only 25% of men versus 50%?
Because I think that they feel isolated. I think they see the lone wolf, and I think they see, the clown, and they see these caricatures almost of themselves, but there's not this depth that's reflected back to them. I think that's part of it. I shouldn't say. In line with the topic we're talking about, I think it contributes in that way. I think the inability to express emotion or to identify your emotions is huge because you just walk around feeling angry all the time or just profoundly sad with no rhyme or reason as to why, because no one has given you the tools or even invested in you to help deconstruct toxic masculinity so that you can get to the bottom of your humanity.
Yeah. I think that counseling, therapy, whatever you want to call it, is viewed as weakness or soft, or I'm too busy and I don't have time for that because I have too much responsibility that I'm bearing right now. And yeah, that makes me really sad for a lot of men that would benefit from it, but have these barriers of either you have this core belief that it's soft and weakness and it's not for you, or maybe there's a financial barrier, or maybe you're just too busy because you're working all the time to provide because you're responsible for so much and you can't add another thing.
Yeah, what would you say to guys like that?
Well, I think if you view it, if someone views it as soft or, weakness or something like that, I think it takes a lot of courage to go against the cultural norm for men to do something for yourself that is going to make you healthier and happier. It takes a lot of courage to do that. And I think, courage is a very, we think of that as a very masculine trait. You run into, you watch, Braveheart, Gladiator, Kingdom of Heaven, and you see men charging into battle, or you see the king doing it himself instead of sitting on a throne somewhere else, and you're like Aragorn charging the Black Gate, and you're like, heck yes, it stirs something in you. And part of that is valor, and part of that's courage. And I think that when you do something that is terrifying, but you do it anyway, that exemplifies what masculinity and what courage looks like. And I think if you do therapy, but even though there's all these stigmas with it, it demonstrates a lot of courage. And I think for men who are just, I have way too much going on, I'm working, 2 jobs, or I'm working my job plus overtime, and then I have to spend time with my kids and my wife, and I have stuff to take care of around the house, and there's all these different things that I'm responsible for all the time. I don't have time to do therapy. And I just, I totally get that. I'm self-employed, to run my own business. I have 4 children. I have a property to take care of. I have a marriage to invest in, all kinds of stuff. I totally get it. I think my thing with that is if you invest the time, even if it's an hour a week or an hour every 2 weeks or something like that, that you're going to see that all these things you're responsible for are going to feel less burdensome, and you're going to be more productive and happier while being more productive because there's less internal struggles that you're dealing with on top of the things you're responsible for.
Yeah. There was a meta-analysis of over 400 studies that found that exposure to violent media significantly increases aggressive behavior, aggressive thoughts, and desensitization to violence. Unsurprising.
Yeah, desensitization for sure.
Men who consume high levels of media that sexually objectify women are twice as likely to endorse rape myths.
Makes sense to me too.
35% of men who strongly conform to dominant masculinity norms report engaging in physical aggression towards a partner. In fact, conformity to masculine norms like power over women is positively correlated with sexual aggression and hostile sexism.
Yeah, you're internalizing the beliefs through what you're watching.
There was another meta-analysis that was done of 431 studies that showed that watching violent male heroes or anti-heroes increases those aggressive thoughts, behaviors, and desensitization, like I had mentioned earlier. But the long-term exposure predicts aggression in adulthood, not just in childhood.
Oh. Interesting. So even if you're not consuming it as an adult, if you did throughout your childhood?
Yeah. It can predict how you will be in adulthood.
That's interesting.
Men who conform to traditional masculinity norms are less likely to wear seatbelts, visit the doctor, or seek preventative care, contributing to higher rates of preventable death.
Yeah, I've identified with that.
Men are twice as likely to binge drink compared to women, which is often tied to masculine norms about risk-taking and coping through substance use. That's interesting because coping through substance use is kind of glorified in male culture.
Yeah.
Actually, it's just glorified in our culture, period. I don't even know if it's just male culture. I think it's just glorified, period.
Yeah, but then there's a stigma if somebody has an addiction, but there's not if you just do things recreationally to cope.
Yeah.
But then you stigmatize people that goes from coping to having a real problem.
Emotional suppression is linked to lower relationship satisfaction and higher divorce rates. Boys who are discouraged from emotional expression are more likely to experience loneliness, isolation, and difficulty with intimacy. So in summary, with all these studies and stuff, being exposed to this, at least on the boys' end, it increases violence and aggression. It suppresses emotional health and communication, fosters sexism, rape culture, and objectification of women, contributes to male loneliness, depression, and higher suicide rates, and it limits men's ability to form healthy relationships. So when movies teach boys that real men don't cry, ask for help, or feel fear, they're not just scripting masculinity. They're scripting a type of suffering that is being inflicted upon men, essentially.
So you listed 3 specific things there. Can you list those again?
When I said when movies teach boys?
Yeah, what are the 3 things you mentioned?
When movies teach boys that real men don't cry,
okay.
ask for help, or feel fear.
Got it. Thank you.
They're not just putting out a script on how to be a man, but they're putting out a script on how to suffer as a man.
Right, because if you teach that real men don't cry, you're taught to suffer with your hard emotions that are by yourself. The second one was what?
Ask for help.
Yeah, so then you're just basically forced to have the pain of bearing certain physical or mental burdens on your own.
Or feel fear.
Yeah, so then you're not supposed to feel fear, so what do? You suppress it, you cover it up, you disassociate from it.
You overcompensate for it.
You overcompensate, yeah, or you just don't know how to comfortably sit with it. Or to find camaraderie to help you with it.
So here's a breakdown on the impact on women when harmful male stereotypes are reinforced by culture and media. Because it's not just hurting men. Toxic masculinity reinforces gender roles that demand women remain passive, compliant, and caregiving, while men remain dominant. Women who assert boundaries, leadership, or independence are often met with social backlash. They're seen as bossy, unlikable, or aggressive. Cultural narratives in media teach women that their worth is tied to male validation, not their own autonomy. And this has impact on women's mental health and self-worth. So exposure to male-dominated, hypersexualized media in a study that they did, it increased the body's dissatisfaction and disordered eating in women and girls. The message that women exist for the male gaze leads to self-objectification, where women internalize an outside view of their bodies and worth. And then a self-objectification is directly linked to higher rates of anxiety, depression, and sexual dysfunction. In cultures that valorize male dominance, women are interrupted more often. They're talked over or excluded from leadership and decision-making roles. That was a study they did in 2014. Boys taught emotional suppression and entitlement are more likely to devalue emotional labor and relational work, leaving women to carry the burden of emotional caretaking in relationships. So the summary of the impact on women is it results in higher rates of intimate partner violence, sexual violence, and harassment. It affects body image issues, self-objectification, anxiety, depression. It leads to emotional labor imbalances, It leads to partners being emotionally unavailable, especially male partners. It gives women social penalties for being assertive, which silences women's voices. And then it just reinforces like inequality and systemic exclusion from leadership. So toxic masculinity isn't just hurting men, it's also hurting women. It's killing their safety, their voices, their worth.
So, in just your opinion, I'm not thinking you have a study for this necessarily, but so toxic masculinity hurts men. So how is toxic masculinity being absorbed by men and by boys? Do you think it's primarily through media?
I think it's through media, and I think it's through society. Like, I think men treat each other this way too in real life.
Got it. So you're witnessing examples. Like, I'm thinking of like adolescent boys. So they're witnessing in media and they're witnessing examples of the men in their lives.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all.
Yeah. And like, so why would you even think it was any different? Because you're watching it on TV and you're watching it at home.
Right.
How would you even know any different? Same thing with girls. How would you even know any different?
Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Or even like think that there's something different out there.
Yeah.
So there's not just bad movies out there, though. We gave some examples, some good ones, and I would like to explore even more some of the good movies that are out there. So we just watched Good Will Hunting, and I think that there's some healthy masculinity in there because it explores the damage of emotional repression and trauma. Mm-hmm. Sean, Robin Williams' character, models empathy, so much patience and like emotional availability as a mentor. And the message of the film is basically it's not your fault, and it encourages men to face pain rather than bury it.
It is an incredible movie. I've watched that scene. I'm not going to spoil it, but between Robin Williams' character and Matt Damon's character,
Mm-hmm.
A counseling scene. I used to watch that on YouTube, just on its own. So good because you see like this rough and tumble, really smart, really traumatized guy. Rough and tumble is Boston. Is it Boston? Yeah, it's Boston, right? And but then you start seeing cracks, and you start to see what's coming out of the cracks in his sessions with Robin Williams. And I don't know what it is. I can't articulate it, but something about it is very freeing. Another one that is a good film with healthy masculinity is The Pursuit of Happiness, which I've watched that film several times too. So you have Chris Gardner. It's based on a true story. You have Chris Gardner, played by Will Smith, and he embodies the heck out of resilience because of all the circumstances he finds himself in, and devotion and care as a single father. Like this dude, he is being the only parent. This guy is being mom essentially and dad to his little boy. And he's trying to provide a better life for his kid. And he is doing the best he can as a dad. And to see him doing this caretaker role while trying to pursue this stockbroker career is incredible. And then he shows a lot of vulnerability, and it's not hidden. Like, he's struggling with the homelessness. There's a lot of emotional scenes. Will Smith does a great portrayal of him, and he's demonstrating this full range of emotions that he's going through. And then he openly shows his fear. I mean, you could... through the directing and the acting in the film, and it highlights nurturing and consistency, particularly with him as a dad, as these masculine strengths. What he's really, the burdens that he is bearing, while simultaneously trying to take the best possible care of his boy that he can. That is real strength. You're bearing this burden while trying to take care of your kid. I mean, it's incredible. Another one is Paddington, number 1 and number 2. And demonstrations of healthy masculinity in the Paddington films is Paddington models kindness, empathy, and problem solving, but he does it through compassion instead of aggression. And Henry Brown, the dad, starts off really rigid, but then throughout the film, he learns to value connection and sees flexibility as a strength rather than rigidness as being a strength. And then here, masculinity includes caregiving again, and softness and respect.
I love that because that's a kid's movie that you can watch with young boys.
Yeah. And they can start to internalize some of these things as being, oh, these are male traits.
Can you think of any other kids movies that are like that?
I'm thinking Big Hero 6.
Oh, interesting.
I'm thinking Big Hero 6. Yeah. Because you have male figures demonstrating grief. You know, Hero and Baymax, and he lost his brother. Oh, spoiler. Spoiler. And then he's leaning on community, these other friends of his brothers, in connection with them. And you have this brotherly love and mentorship as central themes in this, which is a great demonstration of what male relationships could and should look like. And then there's compassionate problem solving and a lot of emotional processing. And they're framed as heroic and altruistic in Big Hero 6. I love Big Hero 6. I think I've seen it 2 or 3 times.
Yeah. You know, I think Finding Nemo, too, is a good one of healthy masculinity. Because you have Marlin, the father fish, who shows this protectiveness, but it's really rooted in care and not... Like, he eventually realizes that he's trying to control. Like, he comes to that, like, self-realization.
Yeah.
But, like, in that self-realization, though, like, he truly cares for him. And because he cares for him, he's trying to control. But he comes to this realization that it's, you know, to really care and love somebody well, it's not through control. And there's this learned balance between this fear with trust and to support his son's independence. There's, like, this vulnerability there and grief. And there's a growth that you see throughout the film that is integral to his parenting journey. So I think that is the father fish is a good example of masculinity.
I think with him
that is
too.
Not toxic.
I think with Marlon too. How did he get so fearful and protective? Well, his wife and all of his other kids died in the beginning of the film.
Fish had good reason.
And you see him at the beginning of the film with all the eggs and his wife and stuff, and then you see him after, and you see the change, and you see how grief can impact a male figure. And then what happens is that turns into anxiety. So then you see Marlon also struggling with anxiety the whole film until towards the end. So you see a male character struggling with anxiety.
That's a good point. Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. Fred Rogers, played by Tom Hanks, I think is a good one. It demonstrates a gentle strength. And there's like deep emotional literacy there.
That's a good phrase for it.
Yeah. It models that men can express sadness, love, gentleness, and not have shame as part of that picture. And so it highlights emotional containment, not repression, like feeling emotions fully, not stuffing them down, which I really appreciate.
And he gives good words to them. And I think that film, which I haven't actually seen that one, but I think just Mr. Rogers, the show.
Right.
Incredible to watch. And I know it's a harder watch for kids because they're used to, faster paced shows, but the way he puts words to emotions is incredible. Another one that we mentioned earlier that's really good is Black Panther, the original one from 2018. So much healthy masculinity in that film. So you have T'Challa, he leads with respect, he demonstrates empathy and humility, and is willing to listen and willing to change his mind. Okay, on top of all the other more traditional, stereotypical masculine strengths that he demonstrates. He's very intelligent, very strong, courageous, good fighter, all those kinds of things. And then ultimately, he rejects vengeance in favor of justice and more healing or restoration, where, anger and rage can lead to only vengeance, but he actually allows a higher part of himself to reject vengeance in favor of these other things. Also in the movie, celebrates collaboration with strong women.
Yeah,
without
I appreciate
feeling
that.
diminished. I mean, I can think of immediately the 4 main female characters, which, I mean, he listens to them and doesn't feel threatened by them. And in turn, they actually strengthen him. Because he doesn't feel threatened and he's open to their intellect and their strengths and their guidance, it makes him stronger and more formidable. And then Killmonger, he shows what happens when pain isn't processed or when pain isn't resolved in a healthy manner. And I'm not saying that he doesn't have reason, because he absolutely has reason. But I'm just saying that it shows what happens when you don't process pain in a healthy way. And then it's a striking contrast between that and T'Challa's emotional balance and emotional wholeness and integrity. You know what I mean? Like there's that contrast between the two characters. And another thing about T'Challa in that is he does find some empathy for Killmonger.
You're right, it does. And then Ted Lasso, like we said, we love us some Ted Lasso. So if you guys want to see a show that shows emotional honesty, kindness, who promotes teamwork, psychological safety over toxic competitiveness, and really challenges like ideas of leadership, Ted Lasso is a good watch.
Yeah, such a good show.
And the last one, and Jay's personal favorite.
Oh my gosh.
That he puts on a pedestal and talks about all of the time.
Lord of the Rings trilogy. I kind of want to rewatch them and take notes throughout them to be able to highlight just all of the facets of healthy masculinity with these characters in these films. I mean, I could probably write a book just on that. Like, it is incredible. So, just a few brief things about it. You have deep male friendships that are emotionally, like you can talk about emotions and show love and stuff. And there's not this, bravado that can be toxic. So I think mainly Sam and Frodo. Gosh. Sam and Frodo's relationship is such a cornerstone to that. It's broken up in threes, basically. You have Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli's. You have Pippin and Merry. Oh, Pippin and Merry's a good one, too. Holy cow, I'm thinking about Pippin and Merry.
Oh, yeah, Pippin, Merry.
Pippin and Merry's a great one. Frodo and Sam's a great one. And then you have ones that even don't have the same type of emotionality, but there is a respect and understanding of each other. You have like Aragorn and Legolas, because Legolas is a lot more stoic.
Right.
Strength in these films showed through loyalty, yes, absolutely, but also like tenderness and teamwork. There's not a domineering leadership figure. Gandalf isn't that way. Aragorn's not that way. Elrond's got something going on in different parts of it, I feel like. And then I love Aragorn. He shows so much humility, a very much lack of ego. He earns loyalty from the people around him through service and example, not through force. And then you see him like balancing his humanness with his elvish upbringing, which he's open to other cultures. He knows how to speak the elven tongue. He's aware of like history and things like that. And then Boromir, who's a bit more of like your stereotypical masculinity, but his redemption arc is a big one where he shows this vulnerability and taking responsibility. And he's no longer feeling so prideful that he refuses who Aragorn is. And he calls him his captain and his king and says he would follow him. It's just, and I could talk about Boromir's brother Faramir too. There's so many different examples and characters about this. Even the emotions you see King Theoden when he comes out of like the trance that Wormtongue puts him under and he's mourning the death of his son. There's just so many examples I can go on and on about with Lord of the Rings.
I know you love you some LOTR.
Yeah, they better not ever remake those. Peter Jackson did an amazing job and the whole cast did. And geez.
So there are the shows and the movies that portray toxic masculinity versus healthy masculinity and the reasons why it matters to men and women.
Yeah.
That the representation is out there in a positive way and that we consume media and show support for media that is portraying healthy relationship and healthy society.
Yeah.
So next week, we are going to be talking about the Bechdel test and other tests that can be used for film criteria. Join us for that, and we'll see you next week.
I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.